TCSTV viewers, it's Evelyn coming to you live from the camera store tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in here. We have Aurora photography with Neil Zeller. And Neil is a Calgary-based photographer. Hold on. That's me. Whoops. Technical difficulties. But Neil is a Calgary-based photographer. He's also a teacher and somewhat of a legend when it comes to teaching and hosting workshops around Calgary and all over Canada and abroad as well. And people who meet Neil and work with him, they tend to start becoming part of his photography family, and they end up saying things like "nailed it" when they get an awesome shot. And so you have to check out Neil on all of his socials because he has a lot of really cool stuff going on. We also have Canon Canada sponsoring this event tonight, and in partnership with the Cam Store, we have a great offer for anyone that registered for this event. We'll be emailing that tomorrow morning. So if you're thinking about buying some Canon gear, now is a great time to do that. And if you didn't register for this event, and you want in on this Canada offer, you can do so by just sending me an email. It's evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll make sure that you get on the list for that. Plus, we also have Russell Brown from Canon Canada. He's in the chat tonight, help answer any questions, any gear-related stuff. So if you think of something that comes to mind, feel free to ask those questions in the chat as well. And of course, this is a live event, as you just saw me having my own little technical glitch there. But there's a bunch of work happening behind the scenes to make all of this happen. And we hope it goes on without a hitch. And that's thanks to the TCSTV Live Dream Team. Tonight we have Jeff and Gary working behind the scenes. We also have Riley, who always handles all of our socials as a part of our team. But of course, we are live. And so just if there's any issues, we'll definitely update you in the comments. And speaking of which, we want you guys to interact. We'll ask questions all throughout and of course at the end as well. So feel free to join that conversation. And if for some reason you're not logged into YouTube, I want to give you some options. So you can also send me an email. I'll be monitoring both the live chat as well as my email throughout tonight. And so you can email me again. It's evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll make sure that we get to as many of your awesome questions as we can. And so without further ado, he's at the camera store with us tonight. Welcome, Neil Zeller.
Hi, Evelyn. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's been a little while since the summer. We did one on train photography. It's still available in our feed, but that was a lot of fun with you and Dave.
It was a lot of fun. I'm really glad to be back.
Yeah, and of course we have people from all over the place watching tonight. I love seeing where everyone's from. So if you haven't done so already, make sure that you pop that in the chat. Yeah, we'll go from there. It looks like we might have a little bit of a lag happening. So if you guys have any issues like that, try giving your screen, you at home, a refresh, and usually that helps fix that kind of issue. But yeah, let's get into it tonight, Neil. Yeah, you want to show us some awesome Aurora photography?
I sure do. So here we are. Gary, you can start slides if you want. I'm going to be talking about chasing Aurora, how to find the Aurora, where to look for it, and go from there. But to start off, I am Neil Zeller. I am a professional photographer. I'm from Calgary, Canada. I absolutely love the Aurora Borealis, and I am excited to share excuse me, tonight's presentation with you. I want to thank, first of all, the Camera Store in Canada. I can't say enough about what an incredible resource of product and expertise the Camera Store is. I've been a huge fan of this place since the start of my career nearly 10 years ago. I'm always so proud to say I'm a customer here, and thanks to Canon Canada for sponsoring tonight's talk. My career has been built on the incredible Canon gear since the beginning. My gear, we'll just go over that real quick. Since the start of my career, I've used Canon camera bodies. The 5D Mark III got me started. I've now got the 6D, the 5D Mark IV, and now the beautiful R5. All four of these cameras are still in use to this day. I've got over 1 million photos on the 5D III as well. That's a kind of a cool marker to have. I use all these cameras when I'm shooting Auroras specifically because you can't cover all the sky with all the lenses with one camera. So I'm shooting all four on 4 tripods clicking away during these big displays. My lens stable includes the RF 15 to 35, 2.8, the RF 70-200 2.8, the wonderful 100 to 500 RF. I'm also using the EF to RF adapter to use my amazing 11 to 24 f4, and the 24 to 105 and 85 1.8 are the rest of the lenses that I'm using on a regular basis. Let's get started, shall we? We call it chasing the lights, not finding the lights, because it's never ever a sure thing. I'm here to talk tonight about the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, Lady Aurora, the Lady, among many other names. It's all the same no matter how romantic you get about it. I get romantic about it, well, emotional anyway. Disappointment is an emotion, right? That's a thing during Aurora chasing, is disappointment.
Yes, lots of disappointment.
That's for sure. I'm sort of kidding about that. We call it chasing the lights, not finding the lights, because it's not a sure thing, but when it's good, it is so worth it. For me, I've always been a little bit selfish with my time out in the night. I have always protected my time with the Northern Lights, protected it from my professional career. Because you probably always get a bit tired of the thing you do in business, and I didn't want to get tired of the Northern Lights, you know. So now, after making photographs professionally for my clients all week, I tend to go back out and take more photos. It's like if the accountant goes back home and does more accounting on Friday night. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do that because the Northern Lights and the night photography that I do is so incredible for me and for my mental health. It's really my zen. And it's on purpose to protect myself. And again, so worth it. I say it's worth it. What do I mean by that? I mean, this hobby, this chase, it isn't easy. But when you get it right, put the effort in and get rewarded, it's, well, worth it. Neil, how? How does this chasing become finding? What time? What time? People ask me all the time.
What time can I go tonight, Neil?
Right? No. They ask me what time specifically, what time exactly should I go? My cheeky answer is dark. Dark o'clock, right?
Dark o'clock, yeah.
I don't mean to be snooty about it, but it needs to be dark out, right? Obviously the Northern Lights, they show up at night. If you aren't out in the dark when the aurora appears, you won't likely have the time to get yourself ready and get out and see it. It happens pretty quickly sometimes, especially at our latitudes in southern Alberta. It's different around the world in northern latitudes. So the first investment to finding that it's worth it is put in the time. Be out in the dark for many hours. I've spent sundown to sunup on many occasions and caught the one moment of Northern Lights that lasted 45 seconds, and it was all worth it. So dark o'clock. Tourism guides will tell you 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. because their guides don't want to be out all night. So sure, it's dark then too, so that's probably good advice. Where? Neil, where's a good place to see the lights? Ideally, you'll find somewhere in the night where you're away from the ambient light of cities, towns, highways, headlights, kind of away from the pollution domes that happen in towns and cities. Here's the rub. The deep, dark night can be pretty intimidating. Scary. There are lots of things that go bump in the night. Critters, birds, farm dogs, and in the very cold, very cold, there are all sorts of weird sounds crackling and creaking around you. Ice shifts and thunders, and there's things that just kind of crawl around your feet. It's pretty spooky. But the best places are usually pretty remote. They're usually out there. Some of my best aurora were simply pulled off on a field approach off of a gravel road in the middle of nowhere, Alberta. You can go to popular places in Alberta, such as Lake Minnewanka or Elk Island National Park. It's a bit of a party atmosphere on good aurora nights, though. But some simply put up with the headlights and extra noise just to be in and around other people. There's a comfort there. There really is.
Yeah.
I have photographed aurora from all sorts of interesting locations and some even mundane. This map is an approximation of all the places I photographed the aurora in the past 8 to 9 years. That's not to say that's only where the aurora are, that's just where I've been to see them. There's a big wide band that can go from the U.S.-Canada border all the way up to the Arctic Circle.
You got the Yukon on there, Neil?
Yeah, way up at the top there is Eagle Plains, 20 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. One of the best shows I've ever seen on the Dempster Highway up there. It's where I go, the places I'm comfortable shooting, and as I explore further afield at night and on trips, the pins, they expand further out. So I'm just sort of expanding my sphere of comfort and known things with some unknown sometimes, right? You got to sort of explore that a little bit.
Absolutely.
My best wear advice for you is to truly befriend and understand Google Maps.
Yeah.
Really, right? On your computer before you go out, you can hunt for some interesting locations that aren't up a farmer's driveway, for example, that and near interesting foreground objects. You can see grain elevators and bins and rivers and lakes and all kinds of things on Google Maps when you flip it over to satellite view, and that's what's shown here. At night when you're traveling around and you wonder if this road you're about to turn down is a good one, you can just bring up Google Maps on your phone. Have a look and see exactly where you are. Pan out and see, make sure you're not going to drive up someone's road and end up in their yard. That gets a little dicey at times. I found, panning around on the map app, this spot that's pinned in this image right here, and it resulted in one of my all-time favorite Aurora photos. Right? Right? This was a moment, right?
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
This was part of a sequence of something like 800 photos that went. This is one shot where that meteor streaked through there, and so I found the location with the reflections with the Aurora, and if that wasn't enough, this big meteor burst through there. This is shot on the 11 millimeter wide too, so you can imagine how big that meteor was in person too. Tons of fun. Now, one of the questions, Evelyn, is those photos I see when I go out, this is what I get from people, when I go out, it doesn't look like that. Is it really that bright in your photographs? Well, let's talk about the reality of chasing the lights. Here's the deal. This is a Chasing Aurora talk by a photographer at a photography store, sponsored by a camera manufacturer. If you're going to be chasing, you will add to the worth it equation by 1,000-fold by taking pictures of the northern lights, because the camera and its ability to freeze time to allow more light in, to compress and brighten image onto the sensor, sees the aurora much better than your eyes do. Mm-hmm. This photo was a 30-second exposure. This photo was probably how you would have seen it if you were standing out in the deep dark night. This isn't to say, though, that if your dash lights are on or there's headlights on the highway, you're not going to look out your window and see this. You're not going to notice this there. I noticed, because I'm trained to look for it, like a lightening on the northern horizon, like dawn was coming in an hour, right? You know, that first bit of light that comes up, but what the heck, that's 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's a little bit of dawn on the north horizon. Well, we better stop and take a test photo with the camera and see what it looks like. So this is, you know, true for regular aurora, right? For the stuff that we see, you know, on a weekly basis, you can go out and see a dim band on the horizon, and possibly, you know, open up your camera and take long exposure photos and see the color and maybe a bit of the structure of it. But regular aurora, it makes us work for it. Mm-hmm. Makes us, yeah.
We have a couple questions here.
Certainly.
So with the previous image that you showed, yes. Elizabeth wanted to know if that was Steve, and the comment?
In this, is Steve. I'm going to talk pretty extensively about Steve in just a little while.
So Steve's coming.
Steve has not been shown in any of these images yet.
Okay. And then the other question is, can you just explain very briefly what Aurora actually is, for those that don't know?
I definitely can, and I'll go over it just a little bit in a few minutes, but it is excited particles burped off the sun interacting with our magnetosphere, our atmosphere in the upper levels. It's all driven by the sun. It's energy and you know, what we're seeing is basically the Earth protecting us from radiation. But it's you know, that's probably not right completely. I'll probably get in trouble from people now. But it's an interaction of electrons in our atmosphere that show up as visible light. And the more energy that the sun burps off in the form of corneal mass ejections carried on the solar winds that collide with Earth, the more powerful those shows can be. I will chat a little bit about that coming up here.
Right.
Here's another image. So let me go. Let me go back. Regular aurora make us work for it, make us use our wizard's tech in the camera to get the light and color. Your eyes see the world at approximately 1/60th of a second. Ask video guys; they can explain that better because they're running 60 frame rates and that sort of thing to mimic real life. So everything that's photographed faster than that, i.e. 1/1000th of a second, or slower, i.e. 1 second, will be different and sometimes more interesting than you would shoot at what your eyes are seeing everything. So that includes the night skies. So here's a side-by-side example of what the eyes are probably seeing and what my camera saw that night. It's not a trick to deceive the viewers or the person who rushes out to see the lights and thinks that now I'm full of poop and a liar. It's my right to use the tools. I have worked so hard to learn and to make the best image of what's there. It's art after all. So I advise everyone to pick up a camera and get good, right? Learn. There are so many tutorials available, and I teach from the ground up how to manually operate your camera. Once you learn the basics of the camera and of camera language, then you can keep learning and understand what the YouTuber is saying when you go on and kind of watch a video. You can, when they say stop it down a bit, or bring that light up or open up the aperture, you know how to do that. Absolutely. I'll go over some tech tips on this pretty soon though. So.
Excellent. Also, we got a comment saying that you have an excellent Canadian accent.
I do have an excellent. It's Eastern Saskatchewan if we're getting specific. I have a funny story about that. My son was in kindergarten and one of the older kids in school told his mom that our son had a great accent. These are all kids from Calgary, right?
Yeah.
My wife's from Western Pennsylvania. I'm from Western Saskatchewan. I told my wife, he has an accent. Absolutely. So the best aurora, though, the best aurora that you see in the world when you travel doesn't need a camera, though, right? Like the last two images were made by opening the shutter 30 whole seconds. This image is made in a half a second. So really, really closer to what the eye is seeing. The cranberry colors, the greens, the speed of the movement. This is a truly remarkable moment when you finally see an aurora like this. I've seen aurora like this in Alberta a couple times, and I see it all the time when I go up to the Yukon. This is at Eagle Plains, that very top pin on that map I showed a bit ago. And it's 20 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle and Dempster Highway. I tell my students in these situations to get out of their eyepiece, to not spend the entire night inside their eyepiece trying to make images of it. You end up looking at your photos later on like they're somebody else's. So I tell them to step away from their camera, and when the aurora is like this, just let it flow into you. Let it, enjoy it. Take the experience in with your eyes and your heart and your soul, as opposed to trying to image it the whole time. And then once that's done, I tell them to get back in their cameras because they don't want to miss out.
Miss the chance.
That's right.
Yeah, I've been there with you actually when we've had that experience, and you're so right, because it'd be so easy to just get locked into a camera and just do that. But I think that's such terrific advice.
Your own images look like postcards if you don't stop and kind of take it in yourself without having to be in the eyepiece the whole time.
Yeah.
This is just a couple more images from that night at Eagle Plains. This is at sunset. That's the sun, dawn, or dusk at the end of the day, and it's pretty great. That same trip had some just spectacular auroras. These are all like 2-second shots, half-second shot, 1/30th of a second sometimes. The aurora can get so bright. So these are viewed as seen, right? This is not tricks of the camera, 30-second long exposures to try and get that. So, and just the details are incredible.
There's a question here from Brandon Dick. Are you using any light pollution filters for capturing your images?
No, I try to drive away from the light pollution, but that's not to say haven't got really good photos, right in Calgary, right? There's a big light dome here, light pollution dome. So I haven't tried them yet. I should, and I probably will. I haven't, really found the need for them at this point. If we have to struggle that hard to get, a picture of an aurora or something from inside our own light domes, then we won't let's wait for a better night maybe, or head out in the country. I'm not sure. I just love being out in the deep dark, so haven't felt the need. Your eyes are so important to this process too of finding the northern lights. I say fix your eyes on this. The enemy of dark is light. To see the deep dark night in all its glory, you need to fix your eyes so they have the best chance to show you what's there. This means, and I know this is hard, don't look at your phone, right? Never look at your phone, right? Honestly, ever in the night, because it is so bright. Even on the lowest brighting settings, it'll ruin your night vision immediately. Here's the deal. Your eyes need 15 to 20 minutes of uninterrupted darkness to chemically change to allow the most light at night, so you can see everything that's out there. A street light, your dash lights of your car, another car's headlights, your phone, they all instantly ruin the night vision. So as much as it might seem boring waiting for the lights to show up, any extra ambient light will diminish the experience. That said, if you're going to shoot through your camera, you're going to see everything anyway, so feel free.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think it's on this image, or perhaps the previous one. Stefan was asking about if there was vignetting from the lens, or if it was added in post.
Could have been any one of these. Well, it depends on which lens I'm using too, right? I have 4 cameras going.
It was the
sometimes.
previous photo shooting up, he says. Previous.
Maybe this one. Could have been. Sometimes it'll look at like vignetting, but that might be the edge of the Aurora too on the right side of this image. And because the Auroras stop at a certain point, it just quits and turns back into dark night, and there's kind of hazy bits there. It depends on which lens I'm using too. I'm still using the version 1 of the 16-35 2.8, the EF lens, and that has some vignetting on it, right? I'll use a number of other lenses, and at wide open apertures, you get vignetting. Mm-hmm. You try to take it out, but you end up with some pretty grainy messes in the corners sometimes, and that's just the way it is. I don't find any of that with the new RF 15-35, so that's my kit. My main night lens now is on the R5 is the 15-35 2.8, and it's the RF, and it's spectacular. I'm so excited about it.
Mm-hmm. And you said it was this one, so
okay, good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Great questions, you guys, and keep them coming as we're going through all this.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Just make sure that we're on point, or if we're addressing a specific image. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, how do you know when to go?
Well, Neil.
Well, kids, when do you go out? What is the things that you see that causes you to put on pants at midnight at -25 and head out into the darkness? What are those things? Here we go. Look up. Sometimes I'll just look outside at my house. In Calgary, if you don't ever look, you won't see. If it looks weird in the sky, or too bright out for the night, or just weird, then it's probably a good idea to grab your camera and do a test shot. This is a test shot from sitting on the barbecue. I didn't even get my tripod out, and there it is over the garage. There's a band of Aurora there, right? You can see it, and by eye, obviously there's a big moon there as well, right? So by eye, I couldn't see that. 20 minutes later, here I am, maybe 15, 20 kilometers outside of town, and this is the show in the dark night. Calgary is to my right. This is just, I don't know, maybe 10 kilometers from the city limits, and that's the difference from in town and out of town. And then I had a great night shooting. This was a fabulous night out. So another way that I tell, and this is more likely, is I use science to tell me, and this goes back to the question we had earlier about, how does, what is the sun doing, right? So there's people way smarter than me that are watching the sun. Mostly I check what the scientists are saying. The energy that makes the aurora comes from the sun. Excited particles get burped off the sun and carried to the earth on solar winds. Scientists see this with their science tools. Scientists, and they tell us because it's not just for us. Right? The excited particles can really mess with the Earth's communications and power grids and other technologies. Powerful storms would disrupt cellular and radio bands to the point that emergency crews can't get their orders over the networks. But we, because they share all this information, we chasers get to know and be excited particles too.
You're part of the Aurora story.
Exactly. Space Weather Live is the app and website that I use. They're using all the information from NOAA and the spaceships that are up there, and they're giving us data and information that tells us that something came off the sun, that jumped off the sun, and are we good, Evelyn? Okay, that jumped off the sun, and it's headed our way, maybe, right? And a lot of times it's maybe, because space is, there's a lot of space in space, as they say. Spaceships are flying around the Earth. This image is actually one of their spaceships floating, Emily, floating,
Floating?
spaceshipping,
Yeah,
spaceshipping through an aurora that I photographed. This image and that spaceship, in this moment, actually started a bunch of science that's published at NASA. As we knew that all happened at the same time, and we have the pictures to prove it. Pretty cool. They call me a citizen scientist.
Really?
Bad. Yeah. I'm a citizen scientist. Yeah, it's really neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. There are many other Aurora warning apps that you can get that have like a 10 out of 10 tonight, and it doesn't mean anything to the numbers that actually mean things, the magnetic numbers and the solar wind densities, and like I'm not the scientist to understand all that. I actually rely on a bunch of other people because it can get pretty confusing. The biggest place that I rely is this incredible group of now 139,000 people belong to the Alberta Aurora Chasers. I think I was here when there was about 3,000, a long time ago. Anyway, right now at this moment, there's someone outside watching the sky and reporting back, or at least poring over these stats from the sun to see if the aurora are today, tomorrow, right now. And if it is right now, the Aurora Chasers call it pants on. Because normally you're
step to it.
Exactly, because normally you're sitting at home, you know, in your pajamas or robe watching TV at this time of the night. Pants on is a real thing. So I'm a member of this. I'm a member of this massive group. 139,000 members of them, and at least 40 of them are probably outside right now. And reporting back and you know, and saying that the sky is cloudy or the sky is clear, the northern lights are out. There's a little green band on the horizon. Oh, it's out. Oh, there's a Steve, and everybody goes crazy. When on busy nights when the aurora is really going, there's a main thread that gets built, and there can be 3,000 comments on it of people just reporting in where they're seeing and sending pictures back and going. So it's pretty cool. I watch this page once I hear from the scientists, and this, you know, that the sun is burped. If the chatter ramps up here, then it's time to get your pants on and get it by the door, charge your batteries. Seriously, join up with this group, Alberta Aurora Chasers. They are, they read the data, they share it willingly with everybody, and they have an incredible resource, no question whatsoever.
Excellent. Couple questions here. One of them is from Brandon. If you're going to explain the 500 rule for capturing the night sky.
Yeah, I can actually. I'll do that right now because we are in the settings section. So take the length of your lens and divide it into 500. So if you have a 100 millimeter lens and divide it into 500, that gives you what? 10 seconds? 10 seconds.
10 seconds.
10 seconds as long as you can run that lens without seeing noticeable star trails. I have an 11 millimeter lens. 11 millimeters into 500 is about 41 seconds, something like that. I can run that lens with a shutter speed of 41 seconds before I start seeing the star trails. So the noticeable star trails in a single image. The 20 millimeter lens is 25 seconds. Right, so 20 into 500. So that's the 500 rule, and that's just so that you don't end up with noticeable star trails in a single image. And why I say a single image is because sometimes you want to have those star trails, but those are built on image after image after image put together in post-production. So that's the 500 rule. So here we are. Neil, what are your settings? I'll get a photo and I'll post it, and people, the only thing they ask me is, what are your settings, Neil?
It's heartbreaking.
They're going to, well, it's funny because I could give them the settings, but there may never be a situation like that again, and they'll be irrelevant. They'll go out and set their settings up like that, and it'll be wrong, and then they'll blame me, so I don't think that's very good. Okay, night sky photography, taking aurora out of the equation, is a simple formula. Wide open aperture, strong ISO, 1600-ish, in and around there, 1000, 2000 ISO, and a long shutter speed starting at 10 seconds. That's where you start most night shoots. You can get beautiful stars, you can see amazing, Milky Way, you can go up to 30 seconds for really deep Milky Way things. And then you just simply adjust your shutter speed for brighter or darker results. But when you add in the aurora, it can start to get tricky. Settings for a good, strong aurora, f wide open. We'll start wide open apertures, the lowest number that your camera goes, example 2.8 or 1.8 or 1.4 on some lenses. The ISO is strongish, 1000, 1600. When it gets really bright, you can drop that down and keep your images really, really clean. Shutter speed start at 10 seconds and then just test, right? Light meters don't work at night because there's no light, right? So you're not going to get a great, result from that little meter inside your eyepiece or on the back of the screen pointing your camera up there. It's just going to show dark, right? It's going to show way off to the side. But be ready to change that shutter speed. Boy, I'm going to tell you, aurora can be pretty mundane and just an arc in the sky, and then it can blow up in a heartbeat. So you got to be confident and ready that you know which way you're dialing that finger dial, because as soon as the aurora is there and blasting across the sky, it can be over, and you could have missed it. You could have dialed it the wrong way and blown it all out, or it's too dark or something, right? So get confident where that shutter speed dial is, and just and make those changes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Some really good nights, you can set it and it's just bright all night, right? There's nights that happen like that.
There's a lot of banter happening right now about the 500 rule right now, that, of course, with the different crop sensors, full frame sensors, newer cameras, things like that, it's not always going to be the same. And then there's a good comment here from David Stewart, is watch your histogram, adjust your settings. Can you speak to working with newer cameras?
Yeah, I think that, again, the histogram is like the light meter, right? It's not going to show up accurately at night because there's so little light out there. Everything's just dark. It's just going to be off to the side, right? So I'm a huge fan of taking your test shots, looking at your result,
pictures,
and seeing if you like it or not. Right? There's lots of people that like a darker image. I'm a fan of night doesn't have to look like night, especially for like city and architecture at night, right? You can photograph so that it doesn't look like night anymore, except for maybe a few stars in the sky.
Well, and this type of photography, because generally speaking, you're going to find your spot and you'll probably get, maybe one of your best images of that night. And so if you're, checking your exposure and looking at the image throughout, it's not like you're necessarily going to have as much of an issue with missing that split second thing.
Yeah, the issue of missing in aurora photography is with focus. That's the thing that ruins everything. We'll talk about that in a second, though. So yeah, I'm a fan of just looking at the back screen. You don't have ambient light around you to actually block out what that back screen looks like, what that image looks like either. So you can see what your photo results are immediately and make adjustments. So light meters and histograms are fine when you have that extra light around you, and maybe in a really bright aurora it can be effective, but for the most part, for some, the 90% of the shows that we see is going to be an exercise in futility, I think. Settings for dim regular auroras, like the 90% shows, always wide open again. Let's start wide open and just leave it there. We're using strong ISOs this time, 3200, 6400. I'm using like 30,000 on the R5 now to really up my cadence of my shots. But when it's really slow, 30-second shutter speeds is fine, right? It kind of muddies the aurora a little bit if they are dancing, but at least you're getting an image, right? And you can go that strong. First thing I would do if the aurora start getting brighter is to drop that ISO, right? Start getting back into a cleaner, less noisy image. And then you can start bringing your shutter speed down behind it. But it really depends on what's going on in the sky. If it's really dancey and moving fast, you don't want to blend that with a 30-second shot. So leave the ISO there. This is where I say it's not formulaic anymore. It's just, it's experience, right? It's what you want from it. Playing with settings, and it's not a one-time shot. Like if you get into this hobby, you're not going to go out once and hope for it and then never go again. If you do and get something and you're happy with and you never go again, that's fine too. But you tend to get hooked, and I talk about that in just a little bit too. Two must-haves though. These are must-haves for effectively shooting really sharp, clean images. Is a tripod. Obviously, you want a nice sturdy one for night. Like the small travel ones are fine, but I guarantee you're going to bump into it. Maybe tip it over at night because it's dark out. You're not going to see things as well. I use a big heavy tripod for this. No, it is carbon fiber. It's massive. It stands 8 feet tall and it's all stretched out. But it's got a lot of girth and weight to it, so that it's not going to get blown over by the wind. It's not going to shake and shimmy. And then a hands-free shutter release. And I don't mind if that's a 10-second timer or a 2-second timer that you set. You press the button on your camera and then let it click away 2 seconds later. Or an intervalometer that has all the buttons and the screen on it that can get really confusing to run time lapses. Or an app-based trigger release, right? You can use apps for these new cameras to turn the shutter on. I'm a fan of just the very simple one-button cable release, right? It replaces the half press and full press on your camera without having to touch the camera and shake it when you press that button. Like I say, the delay settings are good and all that, but when the Aurora is going, you want to shoot over and over and over and over again. So what's nice is you can put your camera on continuous shooting, and this has a lock button on it, so you can push the button down, lock it in place, and it'll just shoot over and over for you. It's cabled, it's powered by the camera, so you don't have to worry about batteries running out or your service going away or your Wi-Fi going down, or programming a thing. So no gaps in night photography either. You don't have to program a gap in between with your intervalometer. It's just shot after shot. As fast as you can close and open that shutter again is what you want. So.
Excellent. A couple other questions here I thought we could touch on. Do you ever use the in-camera high ISO noise reduction for when it's a dimmer Aurora?
I do not use the high ISO noise reduction. I don't think it works as good as the noise reduction you can do in post-production nowadays. And what happens is, with long exposures, you take a 30-second photo, it processes for 30 seconds. You're done for a minute. Every photo that you take for 30 seconds actually costs you a minute, because it sits there and processes and won't let you do anything. I find the post-production noise reduction in Lightroom and Topaz and other editing suites way better than what the camera's doing inside. So turn that off, like completely off. Just not worth it to me, and it's kind of like the automatic setting in your camera. It's leaving it sort of halfway there and never really what you wanted it to be in the first place. So the devil the high ISO noise that is better than what the camera will do. It'll eat some of your stars too at night. So as it's kind of cleaning up that image in camera, it'll kind of kill your stars on you a little bit. So. Yeah.
Another question here is, could you talk briefly on solar minimums and maximums, since we get more Aurora during maximums? This is from John Morris.
Well, I'll talk about... Hi, John. I will talk about solar maximum because we're coming into it now. We've had the last few years of really, really slim Aurora opportunities because we were in solar minimum. It's just, it's a 7-year cycle, I think, 7 to 10. Other scientists, somebody else can jump in on that and comment on that. But it's the energy, the solar spots, the corneal mass ejections that come out of the sun. The sun goes quiet for 7 years, and then it gets active, and then it goes quiet for 7 years, and then it gets active. And so we're just coming into maximum again, and I couldn't be more excited because when I started 10 years ago, we were in solar maximum, and it was just a heyday. It was like I was flush with Aurora, and then for the last few years, you had to go so far north, like had to go to the Yukon and Northwest Territories to see a decent Aurora because they just weren't to be had around here, like maybe 1 or 2 a year, where now we're up to, a good one a month kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So.
Excellent.
Now focus. We need to focus, people.
Focus, people. Let's get back to it.
Yes,
Focus.
Focus, yes.
But keep the questions going.
Excuse me. If you were out of focus with your nighttime images, you're wasting your time out there. It's a lot of work to get ready and go. It's a lot. You must learn to focus your camera at night. But how? There's 2 ways to do it. First one is a distant bright object focus. So focus for the night sky needs to be set at infinity focus. That means your camera will make everything from a certain point from you to infinity, to forever, in focus. The stars are what you're attempting to make pinprick sharp, right? That you don't, if those are out of focus, you don't have a photo. If you have a bright enough point of light far enough away that your camera's automatic focus system will actually focus on it without hunting back and forth and then just giving up, you can do just that. Focus on the distant point of light by half pressing the shutter or your back button, and then simply switch to manual focus on the lens. This is now good until you bump it by accident or change it, or change your focal distance. Then you have to refocus, but that's simple. You just point at that light again and on automatic and then shut it off to manual focus again. Don't just set your camera at the infinity mark that's on some of your lenses, if it's on there. It's too imprecise to rely on that, and if it's out, it's just wrong. The way I do it though is I use live view focus. When I had the 5D4 and the earlier camera bodies, the DSLRs, I had to push a button to get into live view so that this, the back screen was showing me what the sensor was seeing. With the mirrorless cameras, that's just always what's happening anyway, so you don't have to do that. What you do though is you turn on the live view. Again, mirrorless is always on. Magnify in 10 or 15 times on the back screen. There's a little magnify plus button. It's like when you preview an image, like after you've taken it and you zoom in on it, that same zoom in button will zoom in your live view, what you're actually seeing. So zoom in to 10 or 15 times. Canon goes to 10, Nikon goes to 15 times. Pan around until you find a bright star in the sky. Just pick up your whole camera and tripod and find a bright sky star and pan around until you see something cross through your screen. Hold your camera there and manually rotate the focus ring until the star is as small as you can make it. You're on a back screen at night, zoomed in 10 times. It's probably not going to look properly in focus to you, but as you defocus, the star gets a little bit bigger, kind of blurs and goes a bit bigger. So all you're trying to do is to make it as small as possible. Once that's done, you turn off your live view focus or just start shooting, just start firing away with your settings. You're ready to shoot, you're ready to go. Yeah, it's the way to do it. It's the only way to really know that you are actually in focus at infinity to get those pinprick stars ready to go. It's so important. If you're not in focus, you don't have a photo. Any questions on settings?
What's funny is that I just opened up a question that came through the email to my email address, and they said the biggest struggle using beginner equipment is focusing into dark night. So that was perfect timing.
So people will also at home, they'll focus on infinity during the day. Sometimes it's a slower lens, it's maybe a kit lens or something. Got to start somewhere, right? And this is a good segue into this next bit. I was once new at this as well. You can lock your lens into an infinity focus position at home in the daytime before you go out. You just got to be really careful that you don't defocus it by bumping it or twisting it or zooming in or out with it. You can tape your lens in place, your focus ring in place. So you once you focus and turn it back to manual, you can have it taped up and sort of stuck there, right? I'm not a fan of that because it's just so many things in the process from day to night and traveling and all that can bump it just out. And again, that just out ruins that photo. Yeah, you can look like a beautiful image on your back screen, and then when you get home and that just out of focus is just so disappointing.
Here's a question that touches on settings in a way. But what do you think is more important? Having a better, higher-end camera that is better at handling these low light situations, or is it better to invest in a lens that's going to be able to achieve great night sky photos?
Yes.
Both are good. But what would you spend the money on if you were a beginner again?
In Calgary here, we're really lucky because we can rent lenses, especially here at the camera store, right?
Yes,
so
we can.
it's something that you can invest in that body that can go deep into the nights. But if you have a Rebel camera or a D7000, whatever, right? Any of these kind of beginner cameras, the A6000, from Sony, whatever, right? Any of these other cameras that are new, and you put a good lens on there, a good fast lens, like a 24 millimeter 1.8 or 1.4, whatever. it'll blow your mind what you can do with that camera, right? So I would invest in a camera, and if you're in an ecosystem like Canon, you buy that lens. You'll buy that lens once. I have all my lenses I've ever bought from Canon still working with me, monthly. I'm using them at least once a month, and the camera bodies have changed over the years, but the lenses have stayed. So I would invest in good quality. You can get prime lenses that are just spectacular at night and fast, wide apertures that see deep into the night. So if you use a kit lens at 3.5, 24 millimeters, and you move to a 16 millimeter 2.8, you're seeing twice the physical size of the sky and 400% more light. And so get a lens. Yeah, that's where I'd go for sure. That'd be the first thing I'd buy.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And that's usually something that we even preach on the sales floor at the camera store is invest in good glass.
Yeah.
If you have to make that choice.
Yeah.
Another question here is, do you ever stack dim auroras? This is from Mary.
No. I will stack images for the purpose of high dynamic range when I have a really neat foreground object. So I'll stack for focus at times, but usually I'm far enough away from my things that everything's in focus anyway. But I'll stack for light purposes. I'll actually shoot a brighter image for the foreground, and just do one of those because I'm not going to move my camera, and then set my settings for the sky and just shoot all night long with the sky as long as I have that one foreground image that I can use. So I will stack for it's what's there, it's what you see with your eyes. But sometimes the camera's dynamic range doesn't reach as far as you want it to, so you got to put it together in an HDR image.
That's why you also have to upgrade your camera sometimes. Just saying. Question here from Laura James about what you were talking about before. So if you're not using high ISO noise reduction, do you have to take black shots? And if so, how often?
No, I don't do black shots. Again, I'm using Lightroom. I don't have any issues cleaning up the images. Sometimes the images just remain noisy too. Like if I'm shooting, sometimes for scientific purposes at 30,000 ISO or higher, they're going to be grainy, right? But the detail in there that you can gain in a short cadence shot that doesn't blur out the motion of the auroras, it's worth it to science and even just the detail that you can do. And then this isn't something I'm going to print and put on a big image on my wall or something. There's other images that are meant for that. But sometimes you just leave it noisy. Like I don't feel the need to clean these up sometimes.
We'll do one more question here on settings, then we can move on and
Sure.
We'll get to some more later. What is how do you balance between exposure time and ISO settings while capturing the aurora?
Yeah. Again, it depends on what's happening in the sky, right? If the aurora is slow moving and a really kind of stable structure, I'll go a longer shutter speed and a lower ISO. If it's really whipping, like there's times where it moves so fast that it's hard to keep up with your eyes. Well, now you need I've shot 1/60th of a second. I've shot, 1/30th of a second images, but that needs a 2000 or a 3200 ISO kind of thing to support that fast motion. Otherwise, you don't get the detail. There's a few photos in this that show that in this presentation, but it's it's a real balancing act of what's in the sky, right? And it just takes time and practice. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. There's no magic bullet for that one, right? It's hard to. It's so dynamic. There's no formula, right? It's like every setting is there's no wrong answer for the settings, but there is a right one or two. Right? If you get the image with whatever settings, there's probably a one that's a bit better. But sometimes it's hard to dial it in the moment, and this is like really panic heartbeat moments. So, yeah, cool. So I was new once too. So I started 10 years ago. I had I was shooting automatic with a Canon T2i with a kit lens. I became night photography curious, like most, by accidentally taking some cool shots at night. Like this one. It was me thinking I was thwarted in the fog and seeing my own shadow made for a fun evening. I honed my craft a little bit, right? There's a lot sharper, a little kind of different thing on that same night. We ended up in Jasper that year at the Jasper Dark Sky Fest. They had just started, it was the first year. I joined up with a night sky class with my now really good friend Jeff Bartlett. He was teaching, and I was so over my head that night. I wasn't a photographer yet, but it was so much fun, and it was the first night I ever photographed the Northern Lights. And I was going bananas with this photo. I was over the moon. I couldn't believe what the camera was showing me. It was incredible. I had no idea what I was doing. Spray and pray, put in some settings, hope. It was incredible. I started playing with, Jeff introduced us to steel wool that night, and burning steel wool. So it's one of my favorite cloudy night activities now. Steel wool, 0 or finer, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, quadruple 0, an egg whisk on a rope, stuff pull out the steel wool, stuff it in the egg whisk, light it with a 9-volt battery. The 9-volt battery contacts on the steel wool will start sparking it. You spin it around the air and it sprays out in these crazy patterns, and you can make these things. It's literal fire. It's molten steel, so be really careful. Don't have anything combustible around you. You see this photo's in a gravel pit in the winter. So it's another way, like when it's cloudy, that you can go out and do these things that are worth it again, right? To learn your craft, to learn your focus. So to focus something like this, you have someone go stand there and point a flashlight in their own face, and then you get to work on your focus techniques as well. It became family time. I started to drag my family out at night with me. They had fun too. They helped me become more and more creative while I became more and more technical in my shooting. Different techniques with lighting and all kinds of things going on. That's me. That's somebody running around and just flashing a light in these different spots in this image. I'm making cool stuff without worrying if it's going to be technically okay too, right? Gives that creative license. All the while still chasing the Aurora. I didn't have great luck that first year though, right? It was a real kind of thing, but it was okay because I had the drive. The FOMO hadn't set in yet.
Okay, Neil, you're going to have to tell us what FOMO is.
FOMO? FOMO, to everybody who doesn't know, is the fear of missing out. The fear of not being included in something such as an interesting or enjoyable activity that others are experiencing. FOMO. I didn't have a clue yet. FOMO for Aurora will change your life. Good and bad, probably. FOMO makes you go out when you should be sleeping. You end up with a chronic lack of sleep because even when you're at home, you're constantly checking the internet for any signs of the Aurora.
Or in the Facebook group.
Chatting with people. You stop drinking. I know people that have quit drinking alcohol altogether because you don't go home and have that third glass of wine or first glass of wine even with supper because you might be going out. You might be driving your car somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that too actually from some other photographers that it actually had been a real beneficial lifestyle changer. Yeah.
You never needed a $2,000 wide fast prime lens before either. But you have one now. Your job is secondary. God forbid there's a show 2 or 3 nights in a row. Might as well take vacation days, right? You buy a 4x4 to take you interesting places and so on. But even with all this prep and life changes, you will miss a great show. You will be sleeping one night and you'll never forget it. That you'll remember that date, that time, you'll remember everybody else's photos, and your drive, this will drive your FOMO to epic levels. This one night in 2013 in October did it for me. I saw there was a show but didn't know what I was getting myself into when I left the house. By this time I had learned enough to make quality images, and this was the perfect night. It started with a shot over Calgary, but I wondered how good it was going to be out of town. After this, the FOMO was real, you guys. I'm going to tell you, out in the country, it was bananas. There weren't many local shooters back then, so it was all brand new. Like I hadn't seen a ton of really good Aurora photos, and I was making them now, and this was just one of the wildest things I've ever been through. It just kept coming that night in so many different places. I would travel around in a few square miles and finding different foregrounds and shooting straight up in the air. Like this is the first time I'd ever seen right up through the corona of a northern light. So this is south of Calgary near the town of Mossley, Carsland kind of area. And I'm shooting straight up into the south. I didn't even know this was possible. I remember shows. I grew up in Saskatchewan and I remember seeing northern lights, but it never triggered on me to kind of figure out where and why they were there And here I am knowing these things now, and it was crazy. I learned a lot of lessons along the way. Don't shimmy under the fence to use a big rock as a foreground, especially when the big rock wakes up and stands up. This scared me because he stood up. He was fine. But what a cool shot. I got this no bull shot here. You're probably going to get stuck at some point. Good advice? Get an AMA membership. Right, that saved us this night. You're just going to pull off in the snow one day and am I stuck? Yeah, I'm stuck. Dang it. We vacation to Aurora hotspots. Most people go to Mexico on spring break, right? We go to the Yukon. We spend March in Yukon. We camp in wide open prairies instead of the mountains because the mountains block the Aurora sometimes. I stay up all night. Well, wait a minute. No, I don't. I have a secret.
You're spilling it.
Yeah, I have a secret. So I don't stay up all night. Do yourself a favor and camp or vacation in remote locations and simply leave your camera out shooting overnight while you sleep. I call it set it and forget it. Meet Mr. Cam Crow, the autonomous nighttime security force. He's thin but sturdy and works all night. No one approaches in the deep dark shadows. He's a mighty bit mysterious and a lot spooky to all who spy him.
Wow, that is amazing.
So set up behind my camper, that thing standing there, no one will ever approach it, right? So that's just a hoodie, or if you're in Saskatchewan, a bunny hug, and a stick stuck through the arms.
It's the camera scarecrow.
It's the camera scarecrow. It's so good. So I just you put a full battery in, you put a full set of, a blank card in, and you point it at the whatever part of the sky you want to take pictures of, set your settings in, which you think will be good for the night, and lock it on and let it shoot. What'll happen is the card will fill up or the battery will die, whatever. However, it can get a bit dicey. I know there's a bunch of you out there right now that are cringing very, very hard right now at the look of these two cameras. So this was just this past October. We were camping in southeastern BC, and I left my cameras out overnight during an Aurora show, and it was worth it. Again, worth it. I just don't remove the lenses until they're dried out completely. Right? These cameras are weather sealed. I'm not going to say they are weather permanent, like you couldn't dunk them underwater.
Yeah, Russell Brown is, I wonder if he's cringing a little bit, but I think for the most part, well, these cameras I know in particular have very good weather.
5D4 with the 11 to 24 EF lens on there, the L lens, and the R5 with the new 15 to 35 RF lens, all weather sealed. No issues, no penetration of moisture. I don't touch it, and so if there's a beam of sun somewhere in the morning, it's still cool out. It's not going to like drip off. It's actually going to more evaporate and kind of fade off. So set it and forget it. Fresh battery. Wake up to wonderful, wonderful surprises on your cards. You never know what you'll catch overnight. That's fake.
We need some sound effects.
I know.
The TCSTV live dream team, future planning.
Exactly. Anyway, this is one. So even though you're asleep, you still got photos, so the FOMO is thwarted fully. Asleep, asleep, asleep. Imagine waking up to this on your card. You'll feel like the smartest person in the campground, and you're well rested. Okay, one of the byproducts of Aurora photography is time-lapse movies. So I firmly believe in the ABS theory. Always be shooting, ABS. And if you're always shooting, you end up with sequences of back-to-back images facing the same scene over and over and over again. And if you're sleeping, or if you're working other cameras, it's hours of back-to-back images. And what are back-to-back images used for? That's right, time-lapse movies. For compiling and rendering my time-lapse movies, I'm using a program called LR Time Lapse. It's fairly easy to use for building night sky movies. It is a bit more involved if you're shooting daytime or day-to-night time lapses. Overall, the experience is a bit time-consuming, but the results are extraordinary. LR Time Lapse sets up as a direct export out of Lightroom, and when you're working on sequences that have big lighting changes, the program jumps back and forth from Lightroom to LR Time Lapse seamlessly, micro adjusting your images to create these incredibly smooth lighting, ramping from scene to scene. For single nighttime scenes, though, it usually only takes the one export, then rendered to a finished time lapse. So can we play video 1? Gary, can we try that? Is 30 frames per second, so that's how you get a 4 to 5 second video out of it. This slide represents a very small accounting of my overall time-lapse sequences. I perform the set it and forget it a lot, so that makes for a really big bunch of time-lapse movies, but I also shoot multiple cameras when a show is cranking. I'll have one camera ready and shooting from one spot for at least 30 minutes at a time, sometimes up to a couple hours, depending on the situation. The longer the better if the scene warrants it. I'll then have my main camera ready to respond to the best parts of the sky. So this is a sequence of me just pointing and shooting in a number of different places. This is actually shot with Northern Lights with an 85mm image or lens, and kind of getting really detailed Northern Lights sharp shots with the 1.8 aperture lens. So while my time lapses are being made on my second and third and fourth camera.
Okay, well, we'll give this one a shot. I think the last one had some sort of glitch here, but should we give this one a go, number 2?
Yeah, go for number 2. A little bit. There were 10 videos. It's all right.
It's just really, yeah, it's just a bit glitchy.
It's glitchy. Sorry about that, everyone. What I'll do is, it's a good way for me to get new followers on Twitter, is I'll post some of these on, on Facebook or Twitter here.
Go follow Neil Z on Twitter.
Twitter and Instagram, both. Neil_ZEE. Anyway, depending on the situation, the longer you leave the camera alone, the better. Let's move on from this. In May of 2017 at Cypress Hills, Alberta, I had the same thing happen. A static camera shooting 20 to 40 minute scenes while I chased the best of the show with my main camera. This is part of a scene when the conditions are right. I can actually shoot in a way that compile the time lapse to get back to real time. I can actually use the blending options and a really fast image cadence or shutter speed, and allowed me to make clips that can show you the exact show as we saw it. The first one is from the same spot as the last. Sorry, we're not going to show that video. Should I try shooting it from mine, Gary? No, don't do it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so time lapses are a lot of fun. So please, if you can, I'll tonight actually go up and post these in a way that you guys will be easily see them. Okay. Yeah. Good.
Okay, yeah, and I've posted Neil's handles in the chat there, so
Good stuff.
Look up Neil Z on both Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah,
so
right on.
it's going to be worthwhile.
I have loads of these video sequences, and if the Aurora is any good at all, I'm shooting time lapse. So it makes it such fun. So yeah, go watch those. The next bit is called Funny Thing. So things can get pretty weird out there too. The night sky is really interesting in prototypical Aurora. That's nice and all, but can be some really odd things too. I'm constantly scanning the skies with my eyes and cameras to see what I can see. The Aurora are normally a structure that starts in the north, and as it gains strength, it pushes southward to overhead, but it's always connected and from the north, even in its various forms. When we start seeing disconnected things in other parts of the sky and photograph it, it tends to gain the attentions of other chasers and scientists alike. One rare phenomenon is this thing I've dubbed Blob Aura. It's just in the southeast sky, typically, from where I'm standing, and in middle Alberta. And yeah, it's just a weird kind of blob that just hangs there, just sort of pulses in place. That's a blob on the left side, so that's in the southwest side of the sky. And the streak going through is actually the International Space Station too, so that was a fun sequence to get with the Northern Lights. So that's the Blob Aura. Meteors are cool. So they can be predictable as annual meteor showers or as they happen, and they can also surprise you too. When you're out in the dark as much as I am, you will have some really unique opportunities to capture weird stuff. I noticed a light while I was standing there shooting the Northern Lights to the north. I noticed this weird light in the sky, and it wasn't a falling meteor, it was rising. It was rising in the sky. The camera was pointed north of the Aurora, and I just grabbed it and reset it to capture whatever it was. It looked like a bunch of shooting stars in a cluster. It was a rocket, you guys. This was this was a spent Chinese rocket body burning up in the atmosphere, visible to people from New Mexico to Alaska.
Oh, wow.
I was one of only a handful of people who got a shot. No big deal, really, right? Media frenzy. So I got 4 good 10-second photos of it before it fizzled out. So it took about a minute to cross the sky. I downloaded one of the photos, posted it to my phone, and posted it on Twitter. 15 minutes later, I got my first news interview. I did 17 news interviews in the next 18 hours. It was incredible. What a fun thing to be a part of, to see something cool like that, to have that much media attention for positive things, for something neat, not something negative. How great. Now, someone earlier asked me about Steve, right, Evelyn? Someone
yes,
said?
We had a couple of questions about Steve.
Yeah, so Steve and I are very close. We're
buds.
We're connected. Steve is now known worldwide as the Strong Thermal Emission Velocity Enhancement. But those in the know that while we tried to decide what this new thing in the sky was, Chris Ratzlaff, the admin and founder of Alberta Aurora Chasers on Facebook, coined it Steve. It was a scene from the movie Over the Hedge where no one knew what the thing was, so they called him, well, Steve. So we didn't know what this was. I'm a co-author on scientific papers that are published at NASA now because of this Steve. I didn't have any plans for this hobby to have so much reach and depth to it, but it sure makes it rewarding when real science is being performed on your work. It's just one of the most incredible things that have happened due to something that I didn't have any expectations for. I'm attached to it because I'm the one who introduced Steve to the scientists. Did you know that, Evelyn?
I did not know that.
I was the person who kicked off the science. Dr. Liz McDonald came up from NASA. She's also the founder of a really, really cool Aurora tracking app called Aurorasaurus. Look that up, Aurorasaurus. She came up to Calgary from Washington to do a talk at the U of C for the Auroral group there. Chris Ratzlaff arranged a social gathering of the Alberta Aurora Chasers at the Kilkenny pub in northwest Calgary. I happened to be sitting next to Dr. Eric Donovan, head of the U of C Auroral research team, and we go into the topic of proton arcs. Well, what I didn't know is that a proton arc, they weren't visible to the eye or camera. So I showed him a picture. The story goes, I told him I have a picture of a proton arc. He said, no, you don't. I said, yes, I do. He goes, no, you don't. And he says, why do you think it's a proton arc? And I said, smarter people than me called it a proton arc. And so I called it a proton arc. So apparently not a proton arc. Nobody can see a proton arc with a camera or eyes. So we called over, he looked at it and said, I don't know what it is, but it's not a proton arc. So we called over Chris and Dr. Liz over to chat about it, looked at a bunch more pictures, and then we played table hockey. So,
Did you get a tour of NASA? William wanted to know that.
I was supposed to go to Boston, MIT actually this last year, but COVID thwarted that. Chris and I were invited to be speakers and attendees at the first Steve conference. I was supposed to go to the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in Boulder, Colorado, to speak on Northern Lights and Steve a couple of years ago at the start of the pandemic, but that got canceled as well. So yes, I will be going to Nassau, and I will be going to the NOAA, and I will be doing these things, and I cannot wait because it's been such a thing with this worldwide pandemic that it's going to feel so good to go finally and actually share these incredible stories. We've been doing it virtually, but it's, it's not the same. Just like
kind
of like this. So next, the following week, after Dr. Liz and Dr. Eric went and talked about this new thing, and they figured they better look at it, right? Because it was something they hadn't noticed in the sky. And this was the image that I showed Dr. Eric. There's many, many more. Media went crazy. The world knows about what Steve is. And some people didn't like the name Steve. But Dr. Eric Donovan talks about that name it something that doesn't have a physical attachment to the thing. And it'll become more relatable.
Like Steve.
Anamorphic, whatever, right? Like, yeah, Steve.
Yeah.
This is Steve now. So he does a TED Talk now about it. Dr. Donovan, he's spoken about it. We all talk about it. Steve's a thing, so we all know Steve. Every Steve I've ever met in my life is a great guy too. So I'm
shout out
happy
to
with
Steve.
Shout out to any Steves.
In the chat tonight.
That's right. Yeah, so it was great. So I photographed Steve now. Now that once you know it might be there, you're looking over your shoulder because you're literally looking over your shoulder for this, right? You're looking at to the north for the northern lights. And Steve usually starts over your right shoulder. It's pretty predictable that way, and it lasts sometimes a few minutes, but most of the time it lasts 60 minutes. It's just the strangest thing. It's pretty predictable for timing and location and what it's going to do. But there's a bunch of things that have happened with it. I've seen it in the Yukon now, which I thought was weird because we see it way down south, and it's such a thin thing. It's the velocity enhancement part of it, basically it's hot space gas, right? It's a very, very narrow stream of hot space gas, and it's visibly propagating to our eyes. It also comes with a buddy called picket fences. These picket fences are even more. People are just picking up on those. There's new studies on that, and so we're really, really trying hard to give these scientists incredible images. I've started to shoot differently when these events start to support science. This image normally would be to get it really, really clean. This is a noisy image. This is 30,000 ISO. To keep this really nice and clean, 10-second photo, that green would just be a blob above that grain elevator, right? But since I was shooting 1 second to retain all of that, they can science that so much better because they can see little tiny structures and details, especially when you zoom in. On the top left of that picket fence structure, there's a little hook on it that kind of points down toward the elevator, and that's a focus of a huge study right now. So it's just incredible. I've seen them all over. So there's spaceships that pass through these. And that's the Aurora researchers' spaceships, and so they see our photos. They see the timestamp on our photos. Keep your clocks, exact. You can use your apps to set your clocks on your cameras or set it yourself, and make sure they're exactly. Because if you end up citizen sciencing and your clock is off, that can screw things up even by a few seconds. When the spaceship goes through one of these Steves, it just flashes through at 17,000 miles an hour. And if your clock is off by a second, it might kind of destroy that science. So, keep the
You gotta
clock.
be a serious citizen.
We talk about it. So
yeah.
the Canon app is great because it just has a button, set the date and time right now, right, from your phone. So it sets it exactly.
And actually, lots of great comments just about the grain elevator shot out near Mosley.
Oh, yes.
Not too far from Calgary if you're not from the area. But yeah, there's not too many of the prairie grain elevators left in Alberta.
There's like 400 of them left in Western Canada. Like, it's sad because they're beautiful. The prairie sentinels, the high rises on the prairies. So we used to drive from North Battleford to Saskatoon all the time, and there's one every 13 kilometers. And you could from the one you could see the next one. Mm-hmm. It's always very cool. I talk about worth it. Remember at the very beginning I said these efforts to go out are worth it. If you spend a lot of time chasing the aurora, you'll find yourself out under the night sky without the aurora. You'll also find yourself in some pretty unique places. This image is Comet Neowise, plus an incredible display of noctilucent clouds. Small consolation, right, for not getting the aurora that night. These are basically space clouds, and they're the highest type of cloud, and they're illuminated over the top of the Earth by the sun during the very short nights in June and July. They're extremely dynamic too. These are motioning like rivers, they're a lot of fun to shoot. So if you're going to go out in that time of the year, and Calgary is unique in that we get enough dark even in the summer to still get aurora. I've got some really cool aurora shots on summer solstice, where if you go north of Edmonton, Fort McMurray even gets way too much light. If you get into the Northwest Territories and Yukon, forget about it. The aurora season ends in April, so it doesn't start up until September again. So.
Do you happen to know if there's been any Steves reported east of the Rockies? This is from Antoinette.
East of the Rockies?
East of the Rockies.
That's where all my auroras are recorded.
Maybe they mean like further east. I know someone is asking about the East Coast that they haven't.
Yeah, there's Steves. If you're looking, you're going to see them. Steves have been reported all around the world. Even over in Europe, there's been Steves. They call them Stefan. No, I'm kidding.
Stefan.
Yeah. They're all over. So they've been reported in many different places. So yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Small constellations again: the moon, the sun, the stars. All pretty good. The Milky Way constellation prizes to reward you for the effort of getting out there. Remember, it's worth it, no matter what. Getting out there. Not having the auroras is a moot point. Mm-hmm. Letting that one sit there for a second. If this is what you get from a night without aurora, these incredible star trails, because what happens is if you go out to shoot star trails, specifically to shoot star trails, the aurora come out and that actually ruins it for you. When the motion of the aurora will ruin a really good star trail sequence. So nobody really complains about it, but it's kind of a running joke that the aurora ruined my star trail sequence. The galactic core of the Milky Way, right? June, July, August, September when it's up.
I like that.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like when you are in the really, really deep dark, this is always a 30-second photo too, right? The longer you can shoot that, the deeper you can get into that. And a lot of people do, when they're imaging this, now they're really getting into stacking multiple images. I'm talking hundreds of images to gain the greatest depth and detail of the Milky Way using apps such as Pixel Insight to combine these trackers so that they can, the Earth moves but the sky doesn't in their images to gain this. So there's lots of ways to do this. This is actually two photos. One is everything except the screen, and then in the moment after the shot with the Milky Way, I took a shot that exposed the screen. One really cool point on this is the director of this movie and Steven Spielberg have this above their sofas in their homes, so on prints. So they spotted this because that's Jurassic World that was being played on that drive-in theater in Saskatchewan that day. Huh. Yeah. Man-made fun, so car tail lights are incredible. You can, on non-aurora nights, you can. There's so many things you can do with your long exposures and your night knowledge. It can be tons of fun. Clouds aren't the enemy, right? Like they can be a real compositional element too. So this church is no longer there; it burned down actually. So it's kind of a historical piece too. but it's I thought it is as good with the lights of Calgary and Cochrane shining off the sky, off the clouds there, and then the auroras in the background. I thought it was as good as if it was just the aurora that night. So clouds aren't the enemy. Neither are the cops. Typically, they're just checking up on you. Most of them will,
if you're in a ditch or something.
You're just parked on the side of the road with, and you're not near your car. You're standing in the ditch. They're just checking up on you. Some more aggressively than others. That is me. Mm-hmm. On the ground.
I know that story.
These are my students.
Oh my gosh.
Those are police that are checking out my tour van because someone saw this scene, this exact scene, and called 911 saying there were 15 people with masks and guns in the ditch. And they showed up with 4 police cars, every police car that they could find, and took us down. Driver, roll down the window and throw the keys out on the road.
Oh
Driver, back out. So 2 funny notes on that one.
Yeah.
Myself, Mike Drew, my very good friend and incredible photographer. These are snips from a video. He put his phone on his head. When they told him to put his hands on his head and come out, he put his phone shooting video of this entire situation.
Classic photojournalist, right there, Mike Drew.
Right. So he recorded this entire thing. 2 things happened. One is, okay, everyone else in the van, step out of the van. And all I heard from the back of the van was one lady go, "Oh, for Pete's sake."
That's so cute.
And then another one is when they figured out, they got about 4 of us out of the car. There was 10 of us total. Got 4 of us out of the van, and the cop says, "How many more are there in you?" I said, "Well, there's 6 more in here." And he said, "Okay, you guys just go stand down in the ditch." And so they all started walking down in the ditch, and he goes, "Not so far." And I hear, "Be more specific," from the ditch. I'm just like, oh my God, I've literally got guns pointed at me. I'm laying flat on the ground, and these people are being snark. Anyway, so they enjoyed the photos and let us go. And media wanted to run this. They call it swatting when someone gets. Anyway, so I refused the media, and the police thanked me because they knew it was going to be a nightmare for them. So
yeah. So instead, we're showing it on TCSTV.
And here we are. This is the first time. This is literally the first time I've ever shown this in public.
Yeah.
Enough time's gone by, and it's enough of a folklore out there now that.
There we go.
Anyway, so yeah, that. All right. Last really cool thing. What time are we? 8:22. We're almost there, right?
Wrapping her up.
Wrapping her up.
So
So
this is worth it. Stay on for this because it's really cool.
Exactly. Stay on for this one. So the Holy Grail, Northern Lights from an airplane. Right. I travel to the Yukon quite a bit. I cheat a little bit. I become the official photographer of a thing called Aurora 360 up there, where there's a plane that goes up and flies around specifically in the Northern Lights for people to see Northern Lights from the airplane. And it's pretty much guaranteed because they can fly anywhere. It's a 737, and they're at 40,000 feet above the clouds. Right. So this is me in the cockpit taking pictures out the front window, which was pretty cool. But when I fly normally, and it's a night photo flight, and I'm going somewhere that's in the northern sky, I book my seat on the north side of the plane, whichever direction I'm flying in. So if you're going to like Europe or something, book on the left side of the plane on the way there because you're going over the pole on the Great Circle route. I have a suction cup mount system that I can use, or I'll just have my tripod if I get a wider seat or a seat that has a little more leg room. I'll just prop my tripod in and literally tape my camera to the window and cover everything up because you don't want those crazy reflections from inside, right? The flight attendants typically just look at me and go, "What are you doing?" I say, "Well, I'm just taking pictures of Northern Lights," and they take a picture, they see a photo, and they go, "Well, that's pretty neat." So here's one of the results. It's pretty cool. Cockpit Northern Lights from that Aurora 360 flight. Yeah, I got that. That was, right up there in my on my bucket list of Aurora photos. If the Yukon ever hosts this flight again, just know it's worth the effort. Go up there, buy the ticket to get on the plane. It is so much fun. So obviously the pandemic again canceled all these things. So they've done 2 of them, and hopefully they do them in the future again. Hopefully I get to be the official photographer. I have a video on Vimeo. Look me up on Vimeo. It's a whole 15-minute tutorial on how to photograph the Northern Lights from a plane. And it's not my best public work, but it gets the points across, and you'll learn how to do it right. And it talks about even etiquette of the people sitting next to you and things like that. So And the last thing is travel for Aurora. You know, again, it's worth it. Go places. Go to the places where they are famous for them. The Yukon, Northwest Territories, Iceland, Finland, Strathmore, Carstairs, Drumheller, Medicine Hat. Travel. The deep, dark nights out there, right? Cypress Hills near Medicine Hat is a deep, dark sky place. So go to those places. When you go to the places where the dark skies are the darkest and the lights are the most bountiful, you save yourself so much frustration. Especially in a group, right? Go with a group. There's like-minded people that are going all the time, and it's so much fun. Come on one of my tours. Gosh, we always have lots of luck with the Auroras, plus we enjoy all the places we go. This is Kathleen Lake in Kluane National Park. Now I'm going to leave you with my favorite Northern Lights photo. It's not even the best Northern Lights I've ever photographed, but the last thing I'm going to show you is my favorite personal photo. So this photo was a combination of a bunch of things, and I called it Collision because I was watching the storm. I was watching the Northern Lights. This is Solstice 2016, June 22nd, 2016. And so this is like just after sunset at 11 o'clock at night. And I found the road. I watched the storm on radar. I watched it by my eyes. I watched the Northern Lights, and I found this spot. And this is Collision. So
It's just magical.
it is.
It's like the ocean. It's like the sky.
It's really,
everything.
yeah, that lightning was so bright it lit up underneath there. Like you couldn't see the details under that cloud until that lightning lit it up. So I want to thank everyone for coming. You guys are awesome. I will post those, and Evelyn will share.
I've been putting links in.
Sweet.
And, yeah,
So I'll work hard to get those videos up, those time-lapse videos, so you guys can see those. My own YouTube channel and Vimeo have some of those time lapses in there.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to the camera store, man, what a fun thing to do on a Thursday night. And for Canon for sponsoring this, can't do it without you, and your gear is incredible. So Evelyn, I appreciate you so much for this.
Well, we appreciate you too, Neil. And I mean, you're always welcome. You come in all the time, and we love seeing you. And of course, this is just so fun to hear your stories and stuff. I mean, we could always sit around for hours and hear about some of your adventures.
Yeah,
So
this was chopped. Like I dragged in over 700 photos into my album while I was building this thing. I could go on for days talking about Northern Lights, the adventures and the tribulations and trials and whatnot. So I had to compress this into this time. So maybe we'll do another Northern Lights one.
That'd be fantastic. And of course, one question just to kind of
Yes.
wrap things up is let's do a quick little thing about what is in your gear bag.
What is in
You
my
are shooting Aurora these days.
the R5 and the 1535 is magic. Like that
yeah.
combination is just fabulous. Even at 2.8. So I was using off-brand 1.4s and 1.8s in the past, but between the clean high ISOs and the quality of that lens, like there's no more coma. The vignetting is minimal. Man, from corner to corner, edge to edge with that lens and camera. So that's my key. Like I don't even think about other lenses until the Aurora get really good. I will use the 11 to 24. I've always, it's a very expensive, big, heavy lens, but man, it's magic. It's so big in that rectilinear sky. Like you can gather, like when the Auroras get good, the limitations of a 16 or 15 millimeter lens or a 20, whatever you're using, is you just miss so much. You're getting the middle of the show. That 11 gets it all, right? So I'm shooting with that thing, whether it's adapted on the R5 or on my 5D4 natively. It just does such a spectacular job. What a sharp lens. It stops down to f4, so you got to go longer with your shots. But when you're shooting that wide, it's incredible. Big heavy tripods, Canon native cable releases. I pay the money for the good Canon ones because at 35 below, the off-brand ones crack and break off. Right? The Canon ones stay pliable and just work.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the most important thing when you're out there is just making it work and making sure that you have good warm batteries. Do you have any tips on that? We had a question before about keeping your batteries.
The R5, everybody thought going mirrorless that the R5 was going to use up batteries, but they built a new battery for it. So we have the better battery, the longer battery. So I've not lost time in the cold using my mirrorless camera now. I have 5 of the good batteries now, so I'll have 5 batteries. I do have a recharger in my car. I have a inverter that I plug into the cigarette lighter socket, the 12-volt socket, and charge my batteries. But when you go inside to warm up, take your batteries with you. Leave the camera outside.
Yes. Yeah, I remember you taught me that.
Yeah, the camera can handle the cold, 100%, right? And there's lots of weird issues when you go from warm to cold or cold to warm, including the sensor changing size in the cold. So there's a stability thing when you bring it out outside, and you know how your house creaks and shrinks in the deep dark cold. Your camera does that to a point too, right? These are all just regular materials that are affected by weather. So it takes a little bit for your sensor to stabilize. Leave it in the cold. Bring your batteries in. If you can't go inside and you want to keep your batteries warm, stick them in your armpit. Or stick them in a pocket with hot pockets going.
Yes.
Right, those chemical hand warmers. Stick them in there with that so they're warm when you go. So warm batteries, cold camera, it's all
keep
good.
Your camera cold, for sure. Awesome. Well, again, I'll just reiterate for people that maybe joined us a little bit later that Canon Canada did sponsor this event. And so if you like, you can join our list by emailing me, evelyn@thecamerastore.com. And we'll add you to the list if you didn't register. But if you registered for the event, watch for your email tomorrow morning. We're going to send you a link. We'll send you a survey about this event. And again, we can't thank enough the TCSTV Live Dream Team. We have had actually some pretty crazy technical glitches tonight, but they made it look smooth so you could barely tell. And we hope that you guys enjoyed everything. And thanks again to Neil Zeller, Russell Brown, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great night.
All right, we hope to catch you again soon.